Ready to dig into something different today. We're ditching the desks and diving into a career that's all about farms, food, and making sure things are running smoothly. Agricultural inspection.
It's a side of the food industry most people don't even think about. But it's crucial, right? Making
Huh.
sure what we're eating is safe, farms are sustainable, all of that.
Totally. And we've got RoleCatcher's career guide to walk us through it. I gotta say, this guide was way more in-depth than I expected. They kept mentioning analyzing, reporting, definitely not just casual field trips.
Oh, not even close. It's a real blend of hands-on work, but also needing that scientific background, even a bit of detective work, I'd say.
Okay, now you've got me intrigued. What does that look like on a typical day?
So picture yourself on a farm, but instead of just enjoying the view, you're inspecting livestock, right?
Hmm.
Checking for any signs of disease, making sure their housing is up to code, all of that. Or maybe you're taking soil samples, making sure there aren't any contaminants, that the land's being used responsibly.
It's like being a health inspector, but for the whole farm system,
Yeah.
which, when you think about it, impacts everything we eat. And speaking of systems, this roll catcher guide mentioned drones being used. It's like farms are going high tech.
They absolutely are. That's a perfect example of how this role is changing. It's not just traditional farming practices anymore. Drones give you that efficiency. You're getting data-driven insights you wouldn't believe.
That's wild. So does that mean inspectors need to become like certified drone pilots now?
It's becoming more and more common. Knowing how to use those drones, how to analyze the data they're collecting, it's a huge asset in this field. You can cover so much more ground, literally, and the information is more precise.
Wow, so we're not just talking about spotting problems with our eyes anymore, it's high-tech analysis.
Mhm.
But let's be real, it's not all sunshine and drone selfies, right? The guide also mentioned hazardous materials, working in all kinds of weather, the not-so-glamorous stuff.
That's the reality of working in the field. It definitely attracts a certain type of person, someone who really enjoys problem solving, being out there, making a real difference.
Someone who's not afraid to get their hands dirty, literally and figuratively. Speaking of getting into the details, let's break down the career path itself. The Role Catcher Guide had a pretty clear progression laid out.
It did. And what I found interesting was how they emphasized both learning on the job, but also continuous education. It's not like you learn it all in school and you're set for life.
Perfect for someone who likes to keep learning, staying up to date on the latest regulations, tech, everything.
Exactly. This field's always changing, which keeps things exciting. They start with the entry-level position, and I love how they break down what a typical day might look like. You're assisting senior inspectors, getting a feel for the day-to-day, doing some basic inspections yourself. They even have profiles of people in these early stages, which I thought was a nice touch.
It's always helpful to see those real-life examples instead of just the theory.
Totally. And speaking of seeing the path, they go into moving up, becoming a senior agricultural inspector. That's a clear step up in terms of responsibility.
So what does a senior inspector actually do? What makes them senior?
It's a mix of experience, often additional certifications, proving yourself. They handle those more complicated cases, maybe supervise a team of inspectors. Their analysis carries a lot of weight. They might even be involved in training newer inspectors.
That's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
But it sounds like there's room to really specialize as you gain experience. And what about reaching the very top, becoming chief agricultural inspector? What's the path there like?
That's the pinnacle. You're overseeing an entire region, maybe a whole district, shaping policy, making sure everything runs smoothly. It usually takes years of experience, sometimes even an advanced degree. But the role catcher profile showed it IS achievable, which I liked.
It's inspiring to see that progression laid out. So we've got a good grasp on the what of this career, but let's talk about the how. RoleCatcher, being a job hunting platform, should have some good tips on how to actually land one of these roles, right?
Oh, absolutely. What I find fascinating is how these platforms like RoleCatcher are really changing the game when it comes to job hunting. It's not just about sending out resumes into the void anymore. It's about using tech to your advantage.
Let's break that down a bit. For those of us who haven't used it, how does RoleCatcher actually work?
It uses artificial intelligence or AI to make your job search smarter, more efficient. Imagine you're scrolling through job boards, you see the perfect listing. Instead of that old copy and paste routine with RoleCatcher, you just hit a button, it's saved to your account.
So it's like having a super organized job hunting buddy. What else can it do?
So much. Their board view feature lets you track your applications, prioritize them, and it gives you this clear visual of where you're at in the process. But honestly, one of the coolest things, especially for a detail-oriented career like this, is their AI-powered resume analysis.
Resume analysis. Now you're speaking my language. I swear, I spent hours agonizing over those things.
I hear you. But here's where RoleCatcher gets really cool. It actually scans the job description, picks out those keywords, the skills they're looking for, and then it tells you what to highlight on your resume to catch their eye.
So for an agricultural inspector role, it might suggest playing up like your knowledge of pesticide regulations or maybe your experience with handling livestock, things like that.
Exactly. It's like having a secret weapon, honestly, to make your application stand out. And the best part, a lot of these features are free.
Music to my ears. Okay, going back to the actual job itself, the RoleCatcher guide also listed some core skills that I thought were interesting. They mentioned critical thinking a lot. Like, it's not just about knowing the rules, but knowing how to apply them in those tricky situations.
Absolutely. Imagine you're inspecting a farm and something seems off, but it's not a clear-cut violation. You need to assess the situation, right? Analyze what you're seeing, use your judgment. That's critical thinking in action.
And potentially having a tough conversation with the farmer too, right?
Yeah.
Which reminds me, the guide also really stressed communication skills, being able to explain your findings clearly, maybe even diffusing a tense situation if a farmer's not happy with what you're telling them.
It's huge in this job. Think about it. You're dealing with farmers, farm managers, maybe even government agencies. Being able to communicate effectively across all those different groups, that's essential.
It's like being a science diplomat. You've got the knowledge, but you've also got to build those relationships, navigate those conversations smoothly. And while we're talking skills, the guide mentions certifications too. Like, you need more than just a love of nature to be an agricultural inspector.
Right. They recommend a bachelor's degree, at least in agriculture or a related field. Makes sense. You need that solid foundation in the science, the regulations, best practices, all of that.
Definitely. And then those core abilities they listed, things like reading comprehension, quality control analysis, it's all about attention to detail, which seems crucial in this field, right? Where even small things can have big consequences.
Absolutely. One detail overlooked could have ripple effects throughout the whole food system. It's a big responsibility. Speaking of responsibility, they also mentioned senior agricultural inspectors. We touched on it before, but how do you actually get to that level?
Yeah, what are the steps? What does a senior inspector even do differently?
It often comes down to experience and specialization. You might start by assisting on those more complex cases, maybe taking on some supervisory tasks, even getting involved in training newer inspectors.
And I'm guessing additional certifications come into play too.
Definitely. That's how you prove you've got that deep knowledge, the skills to handle those senior level responsibilities. And it shows you're committed to staying at the forefront of the field, you know?
Always learning. So let's say someone's hearing all this, they're totally hooked on this career path. Let's get down to brass tacks. The interview. What should they be prepared for, and how can RoleCatcher help?
That's the key, right? Getting your foot in the door. The interview is where you really get to demonstrate your passion for agriculture, your knowledge, your ability to handle those real-world challenges we keep talking about.
And I imagine there are some pretty specific questions they might ask. Thankfully, this is another area where RoleCatcher really shines. They have that massive library of interview questions tailored to specific careers, right?
Over 120,000 questions, and a whole section specifically for agricultural inspector interviews. We're talking questions that really get at what it takes to succeed in this role, you know?
So not just general interview questions, but ones that really test your knowledge of the field. Like, how would you handle a situation where a farmer disagrees with your findings? Something like that.
Exactly. They want to know you can apply your knowledge, especially in those high-pressure situations. It's one thing to know the regulations, it's another to know how to enforce them, but do it diplomatically and effectively.
It's that balance of knowledge and people skills we keep coming back to. And this is where I think having those AI-powered insights from RoleCatcher would be a game changer.
Totally, because it's not just about knowing the right answers, it's about understanding what the interviewer is really looking for, right?
Yeah.
What skills, what qualities are they trying to assess? RoleCatcher helps you figure that out.
Okay, break it down for me. What's an example of how RoleCatcher helps with this specific career, this specific interview?
Let's say they ask, how do you stay up to date on the latest agricultural regulations and trends? Right. RoleCatcher might suggest, okay, when you answer, Weave in your experience with specific industry publications, mention conferences you've attended, even how you use online resources to stay informed.
So it's about showcasing that you're proactive. You're already taking those steps to learn and stay ahead of the curve,
Hmm.
which, as we've established, is huge in this field.
Exactly. It's not enough to just say, oh, I'm a fast learner. You got to back it up with real examples. And if you really want to up your game, their RoleCatcher Copilot AI is amazing for this.
Oh, right. That's the one where you can record yourself answering practice questions, right?
Yes. And the AI analyzes your performance, compares it to best practices, tells you what to work on. It's like having a personal interview coach in your pocket.
Wow. Technology is wild these days. Okay, before we get too caught up in the AI of it all, I want to circle back to the RoleCatcher guide itself. They had a whole section on challenges faced by agricultural inspectors. We've talked about the rewarding parts, but let's be real. What are some of the hurdles?
Well, one of the biggest is simply dealing with resistance. Not every farmer is thrilled about an inspection, right? And some might be really resistant to change, even if it means improving their practices.
Which is understandable, right? Change is
Yeah.
tough, especially when it's something as personal as your livelihood. But how does an inspector navigate that?
It goes back to those communication and interpersonal skills. A good agricultural inspector can explain why those regulations exist, build rapport with the farmer, hopefully find solutions that work for everyone.
So it's not about being adversarial. It's about being a partner, working together to ensure the safety and quality of the whole system.
Exactly. And that takes empathy, understanding, and a real knack for finding common ground. But there's another challenge the guide highlighted, and it's the sheer diversity of the work itself.
What do you mean?
Well, one day you might be inspecting a small family farm, the next you're at a massive industrial operation. Each setting has its own unique challenges, its own regulations, even cultural norms.
So you need to be incredibly adaptable, able to adjust your approach depending on the context.
Absolutely. And always learning, always updating your knowledge as new technologies and practices emerge.
It's clear this isn't just a job, it's commitment. Now, the guide had a bunch of FAQs, and one that caught my eye was about how these inspections actually contribute to improving farming practices. It's easy to think of it as purely punitive, but it sounds like it's much more nuanced than that.
That's such a good point, because it's not about catching people doing things wrong. It's about working collaboratively to make sure everyone is meeting those high standards we've been talking about.
So it's more about education support even than just enforcement.
Exactly. The guide really emphasized that inspectors often provide guidance to farmers, even training, especially when it comes to new regulations or best practices. They're a resource, not just an authority figure.
So it really is a partnership,
Yeah.
working towards that same goal, a safe and sustainable agricultural system for everyone.
Exactly. And that's such an important message because ultimately, everyone benefits from a robust and well-regulated agricultural sector.
It really does. It's like, they say it takes a village to raise a child. Maybe it takes a whole network of dedicated people to get food on our plates safely.
It's true, we really do take it for granted, but it's such a complex system, so many moving parts, and agricultural inspectors are right there, making sure everything runs smoothly.
And not just a static system either. We talked about drones earlier, but I'm guessing that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to tech changing the game in agriculture.
Oh, absolutely. And as those technologies keep evolving, so will the role of the inspector. Imagine using AI to analyze satellite images, looking for signs of disease in crops, or sensors that can actually detect foodborne pathogens in real time. It's incredible.
So it's not just about being a good inspector today, it's about being ready for whatever tomorrow brings.
Exactly. Which goes back to that theme of lifelong learning, right? The most successful inspectors are going to be the ones who are always curious, always looking for new knowledge, new skills.
And that's something RoleCatcher really emphasizes throughout their guide. They're not just about helping you land the job,
Yeah.
but supporting you throughout your whole career journey.
Totally. All their resources, the career guides, the interview prep stuff, those AI tools, it's all about empowering people in their careers.
It's like having that career coach in your pocket, like we were saying.
Exactly. And that's never been more important than it is now, right? With tech changing the job market so quickly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of agricultural inspectors, what's the key takeaway you want to leave our listeners with?
I think it's this. If you're looking for a career that's challenging, but also so rewarding, a career where you can really make a difference, agricultural inspection is definitely worth checking out.
I couldn't agree more. It's been eye-opening going beyond the surface and really understanding how vital these professionals are to all of us.
I'm glad we got to dive into it together.
And a huge thank you to all of you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of agricultural inspectors. Whether you're considering this field or any other, remember to check out RoleCatcher. They've got everything you need to take charge of your career journey. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.